This is All About Home Construction, and here's your hosts, Terry Cannell-Beck and Randy Blake.
That's right. All About Home Construction. Good morning, Randy. How are you, man?
Morning, Terry, and morning to everybody out there.
That's it. It's a Saturday morning here on WATA, and again, want to thank all of our listeners out there, All About Home Construction, especially the listeners on WATA, but the podcast listeners as well. And a lot of those are both of you. So thank you. We appreciate that.
Yep.
So talking again to a listener this past week that enjoys the show. So we appreciate that and love hearing from you guys. So give us a comment if you want, and you're welcome to comment. If you're listening to the podcast, you can comment right there. If you want to send us an email, allabouthomeconstruction@gmail.com. And then, of course, the lovely Facebook page. So.
Yep. I don't get on the Facebook page as much as I should. I know. I'm sorry. But call us here at the radio station.
That's it. 828-262-1567. And we're here for the next hour. So, well, what's been going on, man?
Just working and estimating.
Did you blow away this week?
Nope.
Did you catch on fire this week?
Nope.
Well, that's probably the only two things that didn't happen in the county.
That's true, but it was hard getting around, wasn't it?
Yes, it's been a crazy week here in Watauga County. And, roads closed. Actually, there were structure fires, stabbings. It's been quite the.
Yeah, we had a fire in Valley Cruises while the road was closed on 105. So,
and then 321 closed down.
Yep.
Now, have you seen those pictures of 321 going down from Blowing Rock towards Lenore?
Yep. Matter of fact, my son has a picture of him hanging off that roof up there.
Okay.
Looking down at the yellow line before it was 4-lane.
Right.
There's a section up there that we did the metal roof underneath where you see the open porch right there. We did a roof at 17 foot long and 17 foot wide, but 7 foot long.
Wow.
And we had to give a 5-year warranty that it wouldn't leak. And I guess that was now going on 12, 13 years.
That's cool.
But we had to use a special panel for that.
Well, as I was looking at that, so it's a house that's in the side of the mountain, and the rocks underneath have caved out and crushed it and fell into the road and closed the road off. Well, my question is, and I get to think about this, and the same thing happens all over the mountains here. When rocks slide down, is there any regulations or codes or anything that says you got to go back and test the house? I mean, do you know at what point do you have to worry about the house falling down the mountain, essentially?
Well,
right?
that's a different type of construction there because I know who designed it and I know who engineered it. And there was also soil engineers involved in this.
Okay.
And but there's micropiles that are drilled in the ground. I thought they were a little deeper than 26 feet, but they go down.
Okay.
And steel casings put in it, poured with concrete, and then if you look at that picture where that rock is, that column that's right above it, see, that is actually a 4x4 square column.
Okay.
See, and I can't remember the size steel plate. I've walked all under it and everything. Like I said, we put that one section of roof on it, metal roof.
Sure.
And it's a remarkable house, and it actually leaves a lot of these lots that can't be built on to be constructed like that.
Okay.
And we went and was going to bid on a house, a log cabin in Beach Mountain. And the guy said, well, I want you to price out a block foundation. Well, the block foundation would have been 44 foot high on the furthest corner.
Yeah.
And I said, won't you think about steel? Mm-hmm. And he said, why? I said, well, you can come up with steel far less than you can with the block.
Right.
And he said, no. He said, I'm a civil engineer, and I'll engineer my own floor system. But he built this whole floor block foundation with any walls inside, like baffles.
Yeah.
And the building inspector, I called him up that next spring after he finished that house, and I said, well, how'd that house survive through the winter and the winds? He said, Randy, after he got the first time the wind blew, he come back and got another permit so he could put two more floors inside his foundation. And because I told him, I said, do you realize what you're looking at across the horizon there? And he said, no, not really. I said, that's Kentucky.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing stopping that wind coming out of Kentucky.
Right.
And he just laughed at me, but he learned that these mountains have wind, just like the wind we had last night.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's good to know because seeing those pictures, your concern is like, at what point is the house going to fall down? So, I guess it's good to know that it was engineered and built correctly.
Well, it was. I even knew the contractor that built it, and I went several times and looked at the house, and it was just remarkable. And I went and looked at the house because I liked the construction of it.
That's cool.
Of the steel frame and stuff.
Yeah.
And like I said, I just know who designed it, and I know who engineered it.
Sweet.
But if you look at that picture, and you see that big rock still hanging up there, but it came up because there was a berm behind it. So that berm could be holding water, which could allow it to come through and undermine that rock and stuff.
So that could have been the hydraulic pressure that's in it.
Correct.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, we did get some rain. I don't know. It's just when you have two major roads in the county closed for rock slides, it does make you wonder, right?
Makes you actually wonder about our county commissioners and the town council, because the way the town of Boone is growing, we're building another motel.
Right.
Is it because we want to step up in football again to the next league?
Well, I mean, that's a whole nother topic. But, I told you off the air, I think the county and the town really has to figure out, like, what is the future going to look like? We got to me, I wish we would commit to one of those futures, whether we're a tourism or college town or something, because anyway, that's a whole nother soapbox. But
well, and you heard me say this before, I don't really say it much on the air, but vote for the person that's going to support to have your kids stay here.
Right. Well, I mean, that's it. But anyway, we'll get off that soapbox all about home construction. Hey, fish fry VFW next weekend, right?
4 to 7.
4 to 7 next week. Randy's going to the ocean to get to fish himself, bringing it back.
No,
he's going to fish, and he's going to catch every one of those fish from the ocean. But maybe not, but he's going to cook them.
I wished I could. But, you have to turn so many back loose.
That's fair.
And but we, it will be my first dinner of the year.
That'll be awesome.
Since I had my knee surgery.
Yay.
And
so no, this is not a ticket event. This is a show up and get your fish fry.
Yeah, and eat till it's done. 4 to 7.
Sweet.
Or eat till I run out. How about that?
Sounds good. Perfect. So, well, cool.
I just hope I don't get blowed out. How about that?
Well,
and
the way the wind's blowing, you may fall out.
Just be patient with me, please.
That's it.
And you do have to come through the main entrance because of the construction going on at the VFW.
It's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, hey, before we get into the topic, I did have a question from one of the listeners. Was talking about it this week, and they were talking about putting in or changing out the light switches in their house. Like they have an existing house, existing room. They want to move the switch over to another wall. And I was like, I mean, you could, but if you start to move it to another wall, I guess you have to worry about rewiring, right? That's really the biggest issue.
It is. That's one thing I grew up in was wiring. I should have been an electrician instead of a contractor, but there's a way that you can run a wire out of your box, a three-way, and put two three-way switches in and not move that one box.
Okay.
But if you got to move that box, the code says, and you have to put a J box in, it has to be accessible. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that means if you go up in your attic, you can hang it up in the attic as long as somebody knows where it's at. Okay,
right.
And the reason for that is if you put it, to give you a good example, I was remodeling the old Cannon Memorial Hospital, one of the doctor's office.
Right.
And one of the questions I asked them is, I said, is there any J boxes buried in the concrete? And they said, no, that's against code. And the first hole I drilled right through a J box, and
oh no!
Yeah, and the sparks was a flying, so we ended up having to cut the concrete out and make a repair, and not just one J box, but two J boxes because we had to make the splice.
Right. So, well, for those that don't know, you're not an electrician. That's just a junction box, right?
That's what a J box is, correct? And
now,
even a light switch, like double switches on your wall. That's a type of J box.
Okay.
All right, but it's accessible, so you can take the cover off, you can pull it out, and get to the wires and stuff.
Now, would you, if this was the case, and you're moving it from one wall to another, and you have to go through the doorway, in other words, that it's on the wall with the, that's not with the doorway, they want to put it on the wall with the door, you could just essentially it'd be just as easy to leave that for the original switch and then junction off of it. And
just put a blank cover over it.
Right. And then go over.
And then go over. If it's drywall, you'll have to cut your drywall out.
Yeah.
Okay. But there leads you to another problem. If you cut your drywall off and go in front of your header, now you've made it so down the road, if somebody's
going to cut into it, right?
They can cut into it, yeah. And let's say you sell your house 10 years from now, and you forgot about that.
Yep.
But somebody comes in and they want to remodel, and the first thing they do is, I'm going to change this doorway out. So they start with a skill saw, cutting the hole out. With paneling, it's a lot easier because you might have to take down a piece of
you can see
crown molding. You might have to take a baseboard up, take your door trim off, pull your paneling off, and then that way you can drill and run your wire through it and just jump across.
I guess, would it be safer to go either in the attic or in the crawl space? Depends on how the situation is.
Well, if you...
In other words, go out and then back in?
Yeah, or go down and come back up, or go up and come... Whichever you have the easiest access.
Okay.
And another thing, too, is... let's say that wire goes up and it is longer.
Yeah.
That you can take that... you have to cut your drywall or take your paneling off. As I said, take the wire and drop it back down and put the box on the other side. Okay, but you'll have then that way you eliminate that box totally.
Right.
Or, and you said, take the wire out or pull it out, take the switch out, add the wire, run it up and over or down and up.
Right.
And you can do that by cutting a hole in the wall and fishing it down the wall.
Sure.
Either way.
Okay, that's good to know. And, it's funny you said that because I got to thinking, I remember talking to someone, they were renovating their bathroom, master bathroom, and pulled, I don't remember what flooring was there, but pulled up the flooring because they were going to retile and do everything. And around the outside of the tub, and I wish I remember now what flooring it was. I want to say it was like that vinyl, but anyway, when they moved everything out and cleared it out, got ready to put the tile stuff back in, there was an electrical wire running against the outside of the tub, that like along the floor, coming from one side of the room to the other.
Well, that's just somebody trying to cut corners.
Well, that was it, and I was like, man, that's, for one thing, it's in the floor, and like you said, at some point, someone's going to redo it, and it's lucky they didn't catch it, as they were tearing out the floor and tear it up or get shocked, more importantly. But then I was like, you're in a bathtub, too. And every time you get in, that a bathtub's got to vibrate and shake and move every time you step in it. And we don't notice it, but if a wire is rubbing up against it, to me, is just like an accident waiting to happen because there's water also right there.
Well, in the 70s, they started to allow you to use aluminum wire.
Okay.
And aluminum wire was oxidizing against the copper fittings that it went into.
Yep.
And there was a gel that you could put on it that would help that. But have y'all seen the commercial on TV where the woodpecker's poking a hole in the side of the house? The reason he's poking a hole in the side of the house, he's hearing the wire vibrate in the wall. You can't hear it, but they could hear it.
Yep.
And they think it's an insect.
Well, it's amazing how much our house moves that we don't even know. I mean, I remember having a PEX pipe that came up out of the floor into the kitchen sink, and I guess turning the water on and off every time, it would shake it just enough, and eventually one day it wore a little pinhole into it where it was coming out of the bottom there.
Yep.
All about home construction. We'll take a break and we'll get into the rest of the show. Thanks for listening to us. Are you looking for a sawmill dealership that can provide you with the quality equipment you need to get the job done? Look no further than Blue Ridge Sawmills. We offer the full line of Hudson sawmills and sawmilling equipment, from portable sawmills to skidding winches. At Blue Ridge Sawmills, we understand that every project is different, which is why we offer a wide range of sawmilling services. We can help you from everything from finding the right mill for your farm, hobby, or even your business. We also offer a variety of sawmilling supplies, such as blades and debarkers, so you can get everything you need in one place. If you're looking for a sawmill dealership that can provide you with the quality equipment and the service you need, then come to Blue Ridge Sawmills. We're here to help you get the job done. Call or visit our Cana, Virginia store at 276-755-3833 or our Asheboro, North Carolina location at 336-964-8304. That's right, all about home construction here on WATA. And again, thanks to all of our listeners out there. And, well, just tell some friends about us. That's all we ask, right? So.
Yep, that's it.
All right, Randy. Well, we kind of got off the rails asking a couple different questions there. And but let's get into our topic today, finally.
Well, I belong to quite a few different groups on Facebook. And, like framing groups and things like that. And there's some guys that's out there extremely talented. Mm-hmm. But the biggest argument going on lately is on framing.
Yeah?
Because you got the Union boys, you got the Southern boys, you got the Western boys, and all think their idea is the best. And one guy said, well, us Union boys, we wouldn't ever do anything that's balloon frame.
Right.
Balloon framing is a fast way of framing.
Okay.
And most people don't realize what balloon framing is, but a lot of your older homes in the last century were balloon framed. Okay?
That's what I was thinking. Like, a lot of the stuff from the late 1800s, early 1900s, that was kind of the new trend, I guess you'd say, right? Or maybe not new trend, but certainly the trend.
And platform framing is the other, which 99% of the framers up here platform frame. Okay?
Right.
But then, like I said, you got people that want a balloon framing, and the difference between platform framing and balloon framing doesn't have any bands. Yeah, so
balloon framing, essentially, you've got the vertical studs going from the bottom to the top. In other words, like if it's a 2-story house, you've got a 2 stories worth of a
wall frame,
continuous wall frame, right?
And you come off your mud seal. You build a regular wall with a bottom plate, 2 top plates, with your studs in between, and you stand that walls up.
Right.
You stand those walls up all the way around.
Yeah. So when you see these, I'm trying to think, like you see the old school like barn raises and stuff.
Correct. That's a balloon frame.
That would have been a balloon frame, where there's 500 guys picking up lifting up the walls and tacking.
And the whole thing's going.
Yeah. Okay.
But between platform framing, you do your band, you have your plywood, or your band, floor joist, and plywood. All right. With balloon framing, your floor joist runs all the way to the outside of the wall. Okay. On the first floor, which allows them to sit on the mud seal.
Okay.
Or your plate. Now that's took care of. All right. On the second floor now, you have to inlet and what they call a ribbon all the way around. That sits inside your studs 1.5 inches.
Okay.
All right. No big deal, because as long as your foundation's level, you can pull up in the corners, chalk a line, take a skill saw, set it at 1.5 inches, and clean it up, nail your ribbon to it. Now put your floor joist on top of that.
Okay.
Okay. So your floor joist sets on top of it, not against it.
Okay. Now I'm with you now. So you're notching it to put that ribbon in, which is essentially just a makeshift fastener, I guess.
It is. It's 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
And but the thing about it is faster. But when you have to come back in and put your fire blocking in, because in platform framing, you get up to 10 foot, you don't have to put any blocking in.
Right.
But if you got a balloon frame wall that's, let's say, 18 foot tall, you got to put fire blocking in it somewhere.
So that's the biggest thing, right? Is fire safety is sort of probably the biggest disadvantage, I guess, to the balloon framing.
Yes, the fire blocking.
Because it's, I guess, so in platform framing, it's considered safer because each floor is essentially its own compartment, I guess you'd say, right?
Correct. And so if you drill a hole through it for your wiring or your plumbing or anything, you got to fire cock it, okay? Same would be true with the balloon framing, but let's say over in Tennessee where you can balloon frame and you don't have to put your fire blocking in, and your fire blocking and your fire started in your furnace underneath, it could actually travel all the way up to the roof from the outside.
Yeah. And, I mean, just thinking of how, like, chimneys work, with that vertical column, whatever you want to call it, that cavity, it at some point I would imagine it would act like a chimney and just suck up the heat.
Once the fire starts anywhere, even in platform framing, if it can get through the floors, now it's going to go straight up.
Yep. So, yeah. So that, I mean, that's pretty interesting difference in the two.
We did the Monroe Herman house, and we CO'd it in 2000. And the type of platform framing balloon framing it had a 4x4 as studs for each window on each side and each door.
Okay.
All right. So now that held the top plate, which at that time, the house was built in the 1800s. They only put a single top plate on, but it's a full-size 2x4.
Right.
And
it was probably a full-size 4x4 too.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And a lot of 20-penny nails in that house. And believe it or not, where the floor joists went in to the 4x4s nailed on the side, they were nailed in with one 20-penny nail and one 16. But there was no 16-inch centers or 2-foot centers. The floor spanned the difference between the corner and the window. See, so we had places like in the floor joists that had 16-inch centers, went to 2-foot centers and 32-inch centers.
Ugh.
See, so people didn't know about deflection back then.
Right.
And so when you walk through a house and you feel your house bounce, that's deflection.
Okay.
Not bowing, but deflection.
Sure.
And code allows so much deflection in everything it's built.
Okay.
So that's reading your house move.
Well, but that's... I'm curious, though. Like, I know deflection's an issue. Because of the materials we're using today, the species of wood we use today versus the species of wood they were using 100 years ago, is there a difference in the deflection because of that? I mean, because each species is going to deflect differently.
Yes, it is. Now, we use pine, okay? And actually here we use spruce.
Spruce, right.
In the old days, they used hemlock, okay? Because hemlock was a real strong wood, had long span. And
but I mean, hemlock's a fun one to work with too. It's a strong wood for to be a pine, to be a softwood tree. It's a hard wood.
But they take into consideration when it comes to floor joists as far as shear strength, okay? Or, we had Ronnie Green on the show one time, one of our first shows, and he was talking about why we didn't use oak.
Yep.
Because oak didn't deflect much. So instead of, if it didn't deflect, it delaminated. It came apart.
Well, so here in the East Coast, we have, especially in the mountains, we had a lot of houses that were originally built with chestnut trees before they all started to die. So I guess what I'm wondering is, like, even though they didn't know about deflection, and they weren't adjusting for deflection. Like, that's why we have 16-inch centers now. Because the species were different, is that how they're able to kind of like skirt around it, even though they didn't know about it? Is that how they got to get by?
Well, actually, they were saved by the wood that you talked about, because some of those trees were so old, and the grain was so close that it was so strong. Yeah. That they were able to take the spans that far.
And that was going to be my next question, too, is like, a 50-year-old, a 2x4 even from 50 years ago versus a 2x4 today, the grain's just way different.
Correct.
So you're gonna see that difference in the quality of, or the strength, I guess you'd say, of the wood.
Yes, it is. And but hemlock is stronger than spruce, okay? I prefer using, we can't get hemlock anymore because, hemlock's dying out. But trees as a whole were used for specific areas in a house.
Right.
Poplar, okay, actually makes good stud frame, okay,
Yep.
but is used more in sheeting because you get a poplar tree so bigger it covers more area.
Right.
Very rarely, my house, all right, 64 model, has hemlock floor joists, and some of the floorboards are maple. Okay,
Nice. Yeah.
so it made for a real rigid house being built.
Yep.
Now, that's the only part of it that has the wood, because a lot of the older houses have the wood outside on diagonals, just
Yep.
like the barns you see.
Right.
And because they knew that was a way of holding the houses together.
Well, when you start talking about any kind of framing, the reason we don't mix species now is because it's just the availability of it.
Correct.
Back 150 years ago, it was just as easy to cut down an oak tree as a pine tree, or at least close to the same energy. And so, you were able to pick and choose. In other words, like today when we come in, a sawmill wants all this type of wood, all pine, so that way they don't have to sort it. But back when you're doing piecemeal and cutting the board yourself or sawing the board, having the board sawn yourself, it's okay to have 5 different types of logs.
Correct. It's like my daddy told me one time. He said, we were building a house when we was kids. We didn't care what kind of species it was.
Right.
Everybody knew that you need to have hemlock for floor joists, okay?
Right.
White pine went for studs, rafters. Even oak went for rafters.
Right.
All right, but most time oak was never used for floor joists.
Gotcha.
Well, then turn right around, the oak was used for flooring.
Yeah.
See, so you actually, if you used a weak member for a floor joist and then you come back with oak on top as a floor, and you actually made the floor joist stronger.
Yeah, because you're able to spread that load and it takes it. And that goes, that's it's a whole different building practice, right? But getting back to the framing on that is, if you knew, like, here, okay, Randy, here's whatever species of wood you want, would that change your opinion about balloon framing versus platform framing?
No, because my addition that I have on my house is a modified balloon framing, okay? And what I mean by that is I stood my outside walls up, I put my rafters on.
Right.
Then I came back in, instead of making my whole my walls the same height all the way around, I didn't. The great wall is all balloon frame.
Right. Okay.
The only difference, it didn't go to the plate, it all the way down to the mud seal. It come off the band.
Right.
And it's just a lot easier to frame like that. So, and the reason I frame like that is because I get more energy efficiency out of the framing. Mm-hmm. I look at stuff like that.
Well, with balloon framing, if you're making the argument for it, especially when you think about using like foam insulation and sprays, I guess it could be a little tighter house, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. See,
because there's not as many joints and wood.
Correct, and as far as the wood council and stuff, as far as framing today, they want you to use the least amount of wood.
Okay.
We had BPE in here years ago, and they talked, Building Performance Engineering was here at Appalachian State, and they were all into the green building, which I've always felt like the best way to ever build a house was build your house tighter.
Sure.
But I was about 92% on my house being as tight as they needed it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So codes changed to fit that scenario that you're talking about. And what I mean is we have to have R19 in the walls.
Right.
Okay. So the best way to get R19 is to go with bad insulation. Mm-hmm. Well, in 2018, they changed the codes till you go to an R15 in a wall and something else supplements it to bring it up to the 19.
Right.
So
so that's where the siding and then the walls,
No, they don't. They used to include it back in the 60s and 70s,
okay.
But now they don't.
Gotcha.
But if you've got a 16.2 or 6.2 times 3.5 inch wall, that's a stud wall.
Right.
Okay, you get a 21.7 in it in a foam.
Okay.
All right,
a lot different than 15 and 19.
Correct.
I mean, it's
so if you do 15 bats in your wall, then you have to put the foam on the outside to come up to bring it up to 19.
right.
Okay, and it doesn't make any difference what size foam you do on the outside to bring it on up that next R value of 4.
Right.
So it'd probably be a ½ inch. That way, when your windows go in, they all match to the inside with your drywall and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. We'll take a quick break. We'll come right back right after this. Are you ready to level up your home construction game? Obviously, you've subscribed to All About Home Construction. Now we would like to ask you for some support. You can be like Dave, Bill, and Skipper and help support All About Home Construction. The links are in the show notes. That's right, All About Home Construction here with good old Randy. Thanks, Randy, for coming in, man. I'm glad. I like it when you're here with me, and it's not just me talking to myself. So, thank you.
Well, I try not to, but yeah. I do know next time I'll have to do the radio show from the VFW because Colin got caught by himself.
That's all right. It's all right. We'll make it work. But all right, talking a little bit about framing, housing, residential house framing. Here's a question, and this kind of really just goes with both platform and balloon framing, but I'm more familiar with balloon framing, so I'm really just kind of curious how it works with platform. I'm curious how it works with balloon. How do you make sure that it's structurally sound, like enough to support the weight of the building? Does that change? I mean, how?
Well, no, it has the same properties as platform framing because in platform framing, all your studs line up. Mm-hmm. Okay, your floor joists are 16-inch centers. Your stud are 2-foot centers, whichever you want to do,
right.
Or 19 and 3/16 centers. You ever see the little black dot on your tape? And the only problem is they don't make insulation to fit that.
Got you.
All right.
Got you.
And but then your studs set on top of your floor joists. All right. In balloon framing, the floor joists are set to the side of the stud.
Okay.
But as you go, both types of framing, when you go all the way up to the top of the wall, the rafter sets directly over top of your stud.
Okay.
And so now it carries a load all the way to your foundation.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna play off the news here. Was it New York last week got the earthquake? So if you knew you were in an earthquake-prone area, it seems to me that platform framing would be a little more like structurally sound in an earthquake than balloon framing. Because you got pieces. So because earthquakes is going to be, most of the time when we think about weight on the house, it's vertical weight. It's weighted from the top pushing down.
But
earthquakes are now making things shift horizontally.
The federal government, as far as when it comes to framing, platform framing is the strongest form.
Right.
All right. And I guess the biggest thing that I see in it is how you nail.
Okay.
All right. And then think about this. Most of the air gun people today are using 12-penny nails.
Yeah.
I still frame by hand, and I use a 16-penny nail. So there's a big difference between a 10-penny 3-inch and a 16-penny 3.5-inch nail.
Are those truly 16 or 12 pennies though? Because
most of them's 10 or 12.
I was going to say they look skinnier to me sometimes. It depends on the brand, but I feel like sometimes
or the framing gun company. And now when my shop burned down, I had Max guns. Mm-hmm. Max shot a full size 16-penny nail, 3 5/8.
And that's the brand that came out was like super high pressure, right?
No, actually, the original framing guns and trim guns from Max only worked off 70 pounds.
Okay,
but they're the company that came out with the high powered concrete nail gun.
Yeah.
That equaled a stud gun. The only difference is the nail was in a clip, and it was 1,100 pounds coming out of the compressor.
Wow, that's cool. All right, well, I
like the Max guns.
Sure,
because the Max guns all had adjustable depth gauges on them when they first come out from the factory.
That's the one. That was what, the early 2000s, before 2008, right?
Oh yeah, I had my first Max gun, I think, in 2002.
Yeah, I remember those.
And the Max guns was also a gun that could be used with steel construction and wood construction. So,
right. Well, okay, so I'm going to go back to what I was saying before, where the load, the weight, is going down always vertical, right? Well, with platform framing, you're going to have more load-bearing points than you would in balloon framing, right?
Correct. But it's all, now think about this. In balloon framing, we talked about the ribbon, okay? And I got a text that the ribbon can go all the way down to a 1x4, all right? Well, in platform framing, whatever your floor joist is, that's the depth of your band.
Right.
So you've got a band that's set now. As a rule of thumb, you still have a double top plate.
Right.
All right, on your first floor. You put your band on, put your floor joists on, put your plywood on, start with another plate.
Right, okay.
All right. Now, all that stuff is glued together, not the bands that are in between. They're nailed from, you toenail them in.
Right.
That's the only difference in them.
Okay.
With a balloon framing, we'll go all the way to the roof, so all your nails are all down.
Okay.
All right.
Makes sense, yeah.
And I know it might be hard for people to think about it, but that's the reason I don't like to use a 10 or a 12 penny nail in my air gun.
Sure.
All right, because I want that nail to penetrate both my top plates, all right, and go a little bit into my stud itself.
Right.
All right?
Right.
So I know that it's all carrying all the way through. So
Sure.
you got 2 nails in your top plate, or 2x6, you got 3. All right? Then the same thing. When my top plate goes back on, I put 3 more nails in.
Okay.
All right? Now when your band goes on the outside, that's the only drawback to it is because it's toenailed in.
Yeah.
All right? And then if they don't toenail it right at a true 45-degree angle, then you lose your holding capacity of the nail holding it in.
Yeah. But that's the advantage of hand nail versus a gun, I'm sure. Because
Yeah.
a gun's probably a lot easier to get off that angle.
It
You
is.
go too sharp, not sharp enough.
But people, don't think about back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I really didn't start framing until I was 14, and when I started with my dad. But in the 80s, I remember in Atlanta down there walking walls 3.5 inches is wide, and you're nailing the band 3 stories off the ground.
Right.
All right? And the guy coming behind you is putting the floor joist in. So at least he had a floor joist to stand on. If you were nailing the band, you only had 2.5 inches, so you had to have a good set of boots that wouldn't let your ankle roll as you come around and you toenail. You actually used your boot to actually hold the band in place while you toenailed it.
Okay.
And if you put your toenail in the right location, the band never moved. If you put it at too steep, you drove it in. If you didn't put it steep enough, then you busted the side of the band out.
Yep.
Then you'd have to put another nail in.
Yeah.
So there is science behind it.
That's cool. That's pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff. So, well, it certainly makes you think about how platform framing is easier, I guess. I don't know. It seems like it would be. Anyway, we'll take a break. Come right back right after this. Obviously, by listening to this podcast, you see the value of All About Home Construction. Well, by joining our listener-supporter community, you're not just tuning in, you're standing with us as we are able to support and fuel our passions of the construction industry. As a listener-supporter, you'll enjoy exclusive perks, including hearing your name, or maybe even your business name, on our show. So please go to our Spotify website. The link will be in the show notes, and join. You can join for as little as $1, one-time fee, $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever you think you can afford. Every single penny helps to keep this show going as we can continue to grow and do lots more things. Thanks a lot. And again, more importantly, thank you for listening to this. That's right. All About Home Construction here on WATA. And again, thanks to all of our listeners out there. And don't forget, share the podcast with some friends. And actually, Randy, when you do those little like 5-star checks there at the bottom for those that listen to the podcast, believe it or not, those comments and those checks and those stars or whatever rating your app says actually puts us up more so other people can see it. So we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just go click the button. That's all we ask. So, anyway, talking a little bit about framing here. Before we wrap things up, one thing I was thinking about is with the platform framing, there's more load-bearing points. We kind of mentioned that. But I would imagine that's a plus and a minus, right? It's kind of nice to have more load-bearing walls. I mean, it's structurally, but at the same time, when you're going back in and renovating the house, it's probably a lot easier to renovate a balloon frame house than it is a platform house.
Correct. And when you do your balloon frame and your headers and everything are the same.
Right.
You use your king, instead of a king stud, your studs go all the way to the top anyhow.
Right.
All right. They wouldn't stop in between floors like platform.
Right. Well, that's always a thing. You always hear about. I mean, I'm thinking back. A lot of houses now have sort of an open floor plan, but that wasn't always the case. And so many times you have a dining room separate from your kitchen, and people want to open that up or put a larger doorway or get rid of that wall. But there's always the load bearing question, and sometimes just tell me what makes how do you know an interior wall is load bearing versus not?
Well, that's pretty simple, because if you're going to stop your ridge line on it, all right, and brace it at any time, that would be considered load bearing.
Okay.
Parallel to the long walls, generally load bearing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's got to be a load transfer somewhere. You either got to transfer to the ground or transfer to a header that puts it somewhere else to the ground.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest problem that we had that class on, is because we had a picture that they give us, and they said how many load points are in this house. They didn't have them marked. Mm-hmm. Okay, but one of the load points is the rafter system was up above. The house was so large that the part of the rafter system was actually braced off the floor system that come off the stair system that had to be carried down. Mm-hmm. Okay, and some of these people that's been arguing on the framing argued about where the same thing we're talking about, how loads transfer to ground.
Right.
So they had a steel beam that came out that carried the floor joist that sat on a double top plate, and the load point was set over 6 inches from where it should have been underneath the beam to transfer it to the ground.
Right. So now you're off and you're not transferring it down.
No, now you've got a problem down the road, because that steel I-beam is carrying the floor load above it on 2 top plates, no studs underneath.
Right.
Even though the studs were 6 inches away, but somebody put the header in the wrong. When they laid it out, mm-hmm. Somebody laid it out, somebody built it, and somebody didn't pay attention where it was supposed to go.
So even when it comes to load bearing, even 6 inches off is enough to worry about.
Correct.
I mean, if it's not directly over it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, you want your positive loads, but if you have to have an offset load, that's where your engineer comes in.
Gotcha.
And to give you an idea, when we built Will's house, Dana designed it. We took the time to build it, mm-hmm. or took the time to design it to make everything energy efficient in the house. But then we had a span where the stairs come up, and we didn't want to put a 4x4 under.
Right.
All right. So the building inspector said that's not a correct load path. So I had to get Dana to come all the way back down.
Oh no!
And
stamp it
and do the math on it. And he did all the math on the beam, and he said, "God Almighty, Randy, this thing will hold 100,000 pounds the way we had it built."
Right.
And he said, this more exceeds than the path to the ground.
That's cool.
But it was only 18 inches off. And what it was, I had a double band underneath it on a 6x6, and then it come up, and I had a triple that sat in between it, only 14 and a half inches.
Right.
And the building inspector turned us down on that.
Well.
But we were pushing our load path,
Right.
carrying our load path over.
Cool.
And that system there, in our floor joists were 24 foot long. We wanted the floor joists so they went one span, but they were
Not
intermediate.
pieced, right.
Correct. There was a girder in the middle that carried the span.
Right.
But it was a drop down girder, so our insulation went the full length.
That's good. Yep. Well, that's the trick, right? And I get, again, going back to the pros of balloon framing, to me with, the blocking changes that. But without blocking, it's probably a lot more, I think you could argue it's a little more energy efficient.
And if you want to do some more research on your own, you can look up the Journal of Light Construction on the internet, and they'll talk about the different types of framing on that.
Nice.
And types of corners and types of T's, which the old form of T's aren't around anymore.
Right.
Well, let's talk about that next show.
Sounds good. We'll take a break. Or actually, we'll close out the show. And thanks again for everyone listening out there. And, stay warm this week. Should be a nice week. Randy, take it easy and don't blow away today.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast edition of All About Home Construction. We want to thank Skipper, Dave, and Bill for supporting the show. If you're enjoying this episode and you want to help us by creating some more awesome content, there are a few ways you can show your support. Subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. This actually helps us reach new listeners and climb the charts. And please share this episode with your friends and family. Word of mouth is always the best kind of advertising. You can support us directly through our page on Spotify. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening to us.